Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Bridget Cole Williams, and this is Healthy Relationships Only. So, in a world where we are expected to take lemons and make them into lemonade, let's talk to Dr. Jimmy Henry about how he did a change in his career as well as a pivot as far as wellness on Healthy Relationships Only. Hello, Jimmy. How are you today?
Hello, Dr. Bridget. How are you doing?
Great, great. So I'm excited to do this with you because, we talk about a lot of different subjects on here, anywhere from, relationships and co-parenting and intimacy and, all of the above, right?
Correct.
But we don't have a healthy work relationship if we don't have wellness in our life. None of the other, it doesn't really matter, right? Like we
Absolutely.
have to pay attention to all these aspects. So before we dig into it, tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do.
All right. So my name is Dr. Jimmy Henry. I'm a medical doctor. I served and practiced in private practice for about 10 years as a physical medicine doctor. For those of you who don't know, physical medicine is a non-operative orthopedic discipline where you help people restore their function. I actually specialize in pain management, helping people go from chronic pain situations to being more functional and well at work. um, I experienced myself some uh, uh, lack of wellness that required me to pivot. And so, what I do now, I'm a health and wellness coach. I'm also a career and life coach uh, as well.
Very good. And so you're located where?
I'm out of Columbus, Ohio. I
Mhm.
primarily practice virtually, so I can see clients all around the world.
Very good. And that's one thing that I don't know if people realize that that's not just because of COVID, but coaches, I think for a while now have utilized the virtual platform as a great way to connect with people.
Absolutely, it works well. It actually plays very well into work-life balance,
Mhm.
and you're not restricted by the limitations of geography, and spending less time in traffic in metropolitan areas also helps uh, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
And so part of this whole idea, and if people know me at all, I've done my share of pivoting over time.
Yeah.
But we kind of discussed, your journey, a little bit about mine, and you particularly wanted to talk about pivoting into wellness. So tell me a little bit about that title and what you wanted to talk about.
I really believe that pivoting is important and it's inevitable. I think that especially professionals, physicians need to get comfortable with the idea of pivoting. Too often, I believe that we try to avoid the pivot, and that actually keeps us tied to something that may no longer be serving and suiting us.
Mhm.
When we sign up to go to medical school, the idea is you go in to help people and serve people, and you have this very ambitious zeal about you until you enter the system, and it somewhat jades your expectations of what you believe that you signed up for.
I love the
And
fact that you said, "Until you get into the system." I mean,
right, exactly.
I don't know what other people think, but if that is not well said, if
Yeah,
once you get your in the system, you call it prison, you can call it Medicaid, whatever it is. Once
right.
you're
That's what
in
it
the
sounds like,
system,
right? Yeah, yeah.
everything is a little bit different than what we expected.
It is different, and people have this idea that because we have these healthcare disparities, and we have insurance plans that really don't meet people's needs, that we have a broken healthcare system. But I actually say it's not broken at all. In fact, it's working in the way it's intended to work. The system really, even if a doctor is employed or if you're in private practice and you're independent, you're still really dependent on a system to reimburse you.
Mm.
And that
Wait, so let
requires
me
you.
clarify
Yeah,
that. You're
yeah.
saying because I will often say that the medical system is the most unhealthy system that we
Yeah,
have,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so you're not saying it's broken, you're saying this is what it was supposed to do.
Absolutely, yeah. Think about it. If something is broken, then it would get fixed, right?
Mhm,
And so, patients have been clamoring about their issues. Physicians and providers have been clamoring about their issues, and yet, what change have we really even seen?
mhm.
There's this exodus of people leaving the traditional healthcare model and developing other models that work better for them outside of this pre-built system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big part of it, and we might be on a slight tangent, but I think a big part of it is I think if physicians had unionized, if we because there isn't really an I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, there isn't an organization that protects your quality of life, your balance, like they're making sure you're not overworked, making sure that you're seen, that you're mentally healthy.
Right,
Like
right.
we have plenty of education, maybe even political type organizations. We have plenty of that. But I don't think we have any organization that looks over the physician and makes sure that the physician is okay in the work-life balance or just in life.
That would make too much sense, right? So,
Mhm,
physicians, people look at how much physicians make numbers wise, right? Without taking into account the liability, the sacrifice, the overhead, the expenses, the loans, student loans. So all these burdens, professionally, not to exclude what happens where you have patients relying on you for care, but you also have a staff relying on you for guidance, and then you have administration relying on you to keep turning the wheels, and you just want to help people, right? But
mhm.
someone's looking at a bottom line that you're just kind of this proverbial hamster wheel, just kind of going and going and going. And I think there's two reasons for that. And we're talking about medicine. This may apply to other disciplines
True,
as
very
well.
true.
But certain people have personality traits where you may be selected for certain careers, and
Mhm,
doctors oftentimes have this, I'll say, people pleasing, but and you really want to help people. You generally want to help people. In fact, if you apply to medical school and don't have that as like a major reason, then you'll be discouraged from applying to medical school. So you really
mhm.
have
Or
to.
if you haven't done volunteer work
Absolutely,
or
absolutely, right,
absolutely.
right.
Mhm,
So it's selected for that, which is very genuine, right?
mhm,
But at the same time, um, s- we also oftentimes have this personality trait of wanting to avoid conflict. Meaning, if there's an issue, then we'll kind of let it slide and let it slide. And instead of addressing it, we may even internalize it. And if that doesn't happen, if we do bring it up, you may be discouraged from bringing it up again. So
mhm.
these things kind of help keep physicians in this kind of
Under control.
under control. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a little unreal if you're on the outside of that. And as you were saying, this might apply to other careers as well,
Right.
that ruffling the feathers and
Mhm.
changing the system is going to be discouraged.
Right.
The job may not have a lot of protection as far as making sure that you're having a good life balance.
Correct. Correct.
And I'm going to assume that that was a part of your journey,
Oh,
that
for sure. Yeah.
what you thought you were getting into and what you ended up with was something very different.
So that was a major factor that played into my pivoting, right? And part of my wellness journey was, as though I was a successful and productive physician helping many people, I wasn't helping myself. I
Mhm,
was, became hypertensive at the age of 31.
mhm,
Trying to be an entrepreneur, a doctor, a dad, a husband, and that stress, really just internalized and built up and built up and built up. I was 30 pounds overweight
Mhm.
at the time. So two things kind of helped me to make a transition. First of all, I realized that I became aware that I was unhealthy myself. Also, I had a dear cousin of mine, and she passed at a young age, at the age of 34, from breast cancer. She had no risk factors. She was healthy otherwise, and as sad as it was, I felt bad as a doctor. I couldn't even help her, But besides that, a light bulb went off for me, and I realized there's something external going on that's contributing to internal illness. And I realized I myself was feeling ill as well. So it kind of gave me a different perspective on how to think about things.
Mhm.
And then secondly, being a expert and a consultant, I kind of peeked behind the curtain of medicine and realized there's actually more capitalism infused into medicine than I cared for. And those
Mhm.
two things really led me to pivot.
It's interesting that you say that because I used to be highly, highly involved in church, and this is not a stab or a dig at church at all. But the more I got involved, and I've heard people say this again and again, and then eventually I was on the finance committee. It's not something I wanted to know. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, once you realize, and this is reality, and
Right.
look, it all comes down to the numbers,
Mhm.
and the numbers have to make sense.
Right.
And once you realize the true motivating factor, and the sad thing is that people assume that that's always the motivating factor in medicine, anyhow. But I think
Right. They do.
poor, kind of idealistic people coming, new in the career and young or whatever, and building these careers, we're not thinking like that. We're not
Mhm.
realizing how central it is to what's going on because we believe, well, we're all here because we really want to help people. And when you realize, I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy theories and everything else, behind that,
Right.
that there are people that are there, the powers that be really just want to make the money.
Right. Right.
It's discouraging. And so you found yourself at a position where you wanted to make yourself the priority.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So there's people or systems kind of behind the curtain who are preying upon your altruistic spirit, right? Of wanting and your naivety really about what's going on. So with that said, I gave myself permission to prioritize myself and my own wellness that led me to pivot into my career, really, where now I actually help uh, professionals, physicians have that same permission to pivot.
Yeah. So in saying that, so in saying that, when it comes to looking at your career and deciding, is this right for me? Is it time for me to change? Keep in mind that many people change 10 to almost 15 times during their career lifetime.
Right, right, right.
So I think a lot of people get kind of forced into believing that, oh my God, if I'm leaving or if I'm switching or if I'm changing, somehow that is a sign of failure. But
Mhm.
it's not by
It's
any
not.
means.
It's not.
It's actually very normal to evolve as a person and decide either a certain business, you know, is not really fitting you anymore, or the career itself may not be fitting you. And so to make the change in itself is not a bad thing. Um, but going along when that starts to just bubble up inside of you, when you're starting to feel like, gee, is this right? Am I the right fit? Is this what I want to do? That can often bring along feelings of imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
So kind of share what your thoughts were go like in that phase. Did you experience some of that? And if people don't know, imposter syndrome is when you feel like not only that you're not adequate for the job that you hold, but your fear is that people were going to find out. And so you
Right.
continuously talk down to yourself,
Right.
believing that you're not actually good enough for what you're doing or as knowledgeable or what have you. So
Right.
share, how did you handle that experience?
So, the irony is that even practicing medicine and training for, a decade or more and being an expert, I feel like a lot of us still experience imposter syndrome even at that point, even though
100%.
who else is going to do what you're doing but you, right? So, let alone
Right.
going to a new career. And in order to do that, I really had to um, examine my relationship with my career,
Hmm.
meaning a lot of not just physicians, could be other disciplines as well, tie your identity to what you do as opposed to who
Hmm.
you are. And
Hmm.
that is extremely unhealthy. It actually will force you to stay longer in a situation that's not serving you well. So when I
100.
was able
So
to,
basically saying that you are who you are as Jimmy Henry, you are a physician, like, and your identity is tied to it, or my identity is tied to it, much like clergy,
Mhm, mhm.
it's tied to that. Um, and sometimes educators, not as much as they used to be, but educators as well. So you're in a space where you, not just you, but physicians and nurses, what have you, many times are
Right,
tied to their
right,
identity.
right. Because these areas, ministry, medicine, these are callings, right? But
Hmm.
even before you're called, you're born a person, right? You're
Hmm.
born who you are. So when you take yourself back to that little child inside of you, what your interests were, what your passions were, who did other people see you as? No one knew you were going to be a doctor or a lawyer or a mechanic or whatever you're doing before you
Hmm.
end up doing it. And so really examining, like, who am I as myself,
Hmm.
as opposed to having lost your identity as they're kind of carving you out to be um this kind of cookie cutter physician who does A, B, and C in a certain order. Who am I at my core, right?
But
And
you
at
know
my
what I
core,
find
yeah,
wrong with that?
yeah.
So many physicians are groomed
Mhm.
to be physicians from an early age.
Right.
Some, it's a personal choice, but for a lot of them, they are groomed to be a physician or clergy, sometimes a lawyer, what have you. And being able to identify who they are outside of their career sometimes can be incredibly difficult
Yes,
because
yes.
they have not explored or fully developed other aspects of who they are.
Right. But that's having an unhealthy relationship with your career
Mhm.
and with yourself. Could you imagine
And with yourself.
living life not knowing yourself, getting married to somebody else and not knowing who you are in that marriage?
Mhm.
So I think it's very important to, whatever it takes to really examine who you are. And as you kind of sit in that, ideally you would be doing it um, in the midst of your training and your career. Like I said earlier, the pivot is important and inevitable. You mentioned people change careers 10 to 15 times. But doctors, especially go into medical school thinking they're going to practice for the next 40 years when they're done. And no one ever says, A, it's highly unlikely. B, the system, the way that it is, it's not sustainable. So whatever you thought you were going to be doing, please be prepared to do something different. And in doing so, hone the skills and the many gifts you've been birthed with and use them in different ways, applying the knowledge that you have at the same time.
Mm, absolutely. I wanted to share, I'm seeing some comments. And I realize I keep interrupting you because I think you're interesting in what you're saying. But let me throw in one of the comments that I'm seeing here and then I'll have you finish up. So on Instagram, we're seeing that well, actually, let me look here. Yeah, my Instagram notes don't come across on here. So we have a comment from Cincy Sprout saying, we discussed burnout and compassion fatigue within the hero journey at she works at our Next Level Sanctuary. It's been difficult to find support for our ministry, though, because of the religious affiliation, which I can imagine can happen. She also states, I'd love to see advocates going in and empowering workers' rights for the first responders. So basically stating that, you know, whether it's first responders that often kind of get into the space as well, or what have you, that burnout and compassion fatigue that can happen, and then having decide what is next for you.
Right, right. And that can happen. You know, we burnout sometimes kind of gets, you know, overused or thrown around quite a bit, but it really is a external manifestation of what's going on inside, right? These stressors, you know, so I coined a term, I call it toxic doc syndrome, kind of
Mm,
playing on what we learn in medical school, toxic shock syndrome. For those of you who don't know, it's a medical condition where oftentimes it can happen due to, you know, wounds, abscesses. Commonly can happen to intrauterine or tampon that's retained. But what happens is there's an inflammatory response within your body. So it's a multi-system inflammatory response. In the medical field, we're in a toxic environment, right? We're exposed to certain things, aggressions and microaggressions, traumas that you have to process. You're going from one ER bay to another. You're processing, giving, you know, grief, you know, bad news without having, and then trying to smile to the next person, not knowing what you just experienced. So in that way, we're internalizing all these stresses that will then manifest themselves in different organ systems. This also plays into traditional Chinese medicine too. So there are ailments that different organs may have that represent different emotions that are unprocessed. And toxic doc syndrome is kind of a cute way of saying that. But, you know, think about how doctors or first responders, you know, you've been doing it 5, 10, 15 years. Over time, you just lack the compassion you should have when you first started.
mhm.
You kind of become bitter, jaded. You're like, oh, here comes this frequent flyer person again. You know, not the same zeal you had when you entered, because of this toxic exposure that you've been experiencing.
So tell me, so kind of coming back around, when you decided to make your change and pivot in your career,
Right.
um, did you experience the imposter syndrome? Did you start to question your journey and your compassion and whether you're in the right place?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I actually, you know, I'm a coach now, but even coaches need coaches. So I actually sought
Mhm.
a coach to kind of help me navigate that issue, as well. And then, you know, you kind of have to realize everything that you learn and experience is applicable in other areas of life as well. Like I said before, we're all not just born with one gift. We have multiple gifts. And so you have to figure out, how can I use what I've learned and the gifts I've developed in a different space to continue to help and serve other people, which is still my passion. So yes, I definitely did experience that, but I was aware enough to understand that I was experiencing it and then took action towards addressing it.
Very good. So then you went from obviously practicing to then
Yeah,
taking that same skill set, that same you translate it into becoming a coach. So
correct.
this is the thing with pivoting, it doesn't mean abandoning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
Pivoting is taking that skill set but applying it to something new.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's a great way of phrasing it. You know, there's no reason to waste anything that you've accomplished over this time, but it's also an opportunity to explore different ways of doing things. Right. So medicine is very prescriptive, whereas
Mhm.
coaching is very preventative. And you know, medicine is very You provide treatments and recommendations, whereas coaching is very exploratory and helping people discover themselves and helping them get unstuck and solve their problems
Mhm.
really themselves, as opposed to giving them the answer to the test. And so I've been fortunate to be able to have this opportunity to help people really explore their own relationships with themselves, their career, relationships with food, with exercise, different ways to help them transform their physical weight, emotional weight into wellness.
So it sounds like you're doing more than just career. Like, explain who's your typical client? Because it
Yeah,
sounds like
so
you're
my
doing a
yeah, my
lot.
typical client is either a physician or professional who is experiencing burnout. They're oftentimes overweight, and they want to experience wellness, right? So part of what I do is I give them permission to prioritize themselves. That permission may
Mm.
include pivoting in their career, not necessarily jumping ship to a new career, but looking at things differently in that same space, right? And then give them strategies to help them reach their goals, right? So I work on alignment, mindset, exercise, nutrition. It spells amen. It's a very easy
I
method.
love this.
Yeah. And really it really helps people get from point A to point B without the guesswork.
So say what the amen is again.
Yeah. So alignment really points to what is your why for wanting to be well, or what's your why for wanting to pivot in your career. And oftentimes are your actions aligned with your why, right? You have to take necessary steps to get to where you want to go. And oftentimes people have trouble getting well or pivoting because they don't have the correct goals and their actions aren't aligned with their goals. The other problem is their why isn't great enough. So the
Mm.
why has to often be greater. Wanting to help people is a great why. Wanting to fulfill your purpose that God gave you, that's a great why, right? Wanting to be rich and famous is not a great why, right? That's
That's
not
not a great one.
right. Okay. So M stands for mindset. Um, the Bible talks about having to renew your mind to transform your body, right? And you can apply that to your life, your career. You've got to think about things differently in order to do things differently. For me, that required a lot of unlearning of things. Like I said, medicine and coaching are two different spaces, so it requires some re-education. uh, Exercise, using movement as medicine, but you can apply
Mhm.
that in different ways, right? What is your output? What exactly are you doing? Are you exerting yourself? What are you focusing your attention on? And then nutrition, I really focus on using food as fuel, right? We
Right. I
oftentimes
love
use
that.
food to satisfy emotions we haven't processed, right? But
Right.
food really its purpose is to fuel our actions. If you want to apply that to not just food, but what are you intaking? What are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? What
What
are you
do
surrounding yourself
yes.
with? What is your input? So
Yeah.
I use this framework with
Yeah.
all my coaches, and it works. It works great.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. And to be honest, like this, you're again combining your career wellness with your
Mhm.
physical mental wellness. And if
Correct.
they are not connected, one really doesn't you can't be
Right.
super successful in a career, and if you're personally broken, if your home is you can't build a house on toothpicks, right? Like there's no
No.
no base.
No.
And if your home is great, if you're doing great, but your career you're unfulfilled, you're feeling empty, you're working in a
Right.
silo because you
Right.
might feel good physically, mentally about yourself, but you're not getting fed from your career. And the
Correct.
fact that nutrition is not just what you're eating, but nutrition is what is your fuel? What are you taking in? What is your
Yeah.
exposures?
Mhm.
Absolutely love that. Absolutely love that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. And like are the environments that we're often in, part of the pivot is identifying and recognizing you're in a toxic environment. So how do you change that? You either have to change your environment or change your position within the environment.
Mhm.
So you may still be in the same expertise, same career, but you may not be in direct patient care. You may move to administration, or you
Mhm.
may not be directly on the front lines, an emergency responder. You may move to doing something, different that suits you where you're at in your life. um, we all have to kind of count the cost of
Mhm.
really everything that we do. You could be productive, you could be the highest grossing earner at whatever job you're at, but like you said, if your home never sees you around, what
Mhm.
legacy are you really leaving, right? So
Right.
we
Right.
really have to prioritize, get things in alignment the way that they should be, in order to pivot into wellness.
Absolutely, I love that. So, even in saying all this, that we're talking about medicine because we're two physicians, but we're talking about you might be working for an organization. It might be a toxic organization. Where you might find yourself not being fulfilled, and so we're talking about any and every career where you may be at a point of pivoting.
Correct. Correct.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I read, I've pivoted a couple of times already, right? And one of the things that I came across was this article that when you don't feel appreciated, what do you do? And really, and I think it was actually for travel agents, right? Because to be honest, at this point in the career, most people book their own travel, their own
Exactly.
vacations, right? And so this whole thing was about not feeling appreciated as a travel agent, or people pick your brain, but they don't actually hire you, and feeling kind of out of sorts. And one thing that came out of that article was really identifying. So, if this is in your career, identifying the problem that you don't feel appreciated, you don't feel like there's growth, you're wanting something that is more fulfilling, but trying to identify what is the actual problem with the job that you have, right?
Right.
What is not connecting for you? And then to, if you're trying, if it's appreciation, if it's feeling that you have growth, that you, whatever it may be, when was the last time you felt that the most, right?
Mhm.
Whether within the job or outside of the job, when's the last time? So at one point, particularly, being in the medical cannabis space, and I've really built a practice where I see really sometimes the most sick of patients. Like, I have a lot of cancer patients, MS patients, what have you. But I also have patients that kind of want to get in and get out, and just, you know, the medical piece is not really a priority for them. And I've had all sorts of people yell at me and have an attitude with me, and, you know, really make me feel as if the doctor aspect is completely unappreciated and unwanted. And after this one lady, by the time she finished yelling at me about how what I was doing was of no importance to her, and I was really a necessity that she had to deal with, I
Mhm.
was this is
Mhm.
this is crazy, right?
Right.
And I said, "Okay." And so instead of, like, dwelling in that, I said, "Okay, when do I feel most appreciated in this job?" Because I do care about the patients. I do think this is great medicine. I do feel like when I'm able to guide someone, and not just, when to smoke, how to, that's not what it is. I'm talking about the intricate parts of, like, cannabinoids, and accessing the right type of medicine, and where is that available, and helping the families deal with the medical illness, and helping people get off of medications, and all those aspects of it. And it's with my senior population, right? The ones that want to hear from a physician versus, someone at a dispensary, or, whatever it may be. And so at that point, in realizing when I felt the most appreciated is with my senior population, is when I started pivoting my medical cannabis practice to seniors, to even
Absolutely.
though I'm in that space, but really just even marketing it more towards seniors and making
That's
that
great.
my focus because that's who I should be dealing with. And at that point, you explore that, right? That it doesn't always, sometimes you might stay in the same company, but you just, as you were saying, you might go from patient care to administration. Um, so for some doctors, the patients, that's not their jam, you
Mhm,
know,
mhm.
but they enjoy helping. They might be more research oriented. There might be another aspect of it where you can stay in the same company, but then do it in a different way.
That's great. That's well said. It's really important to identify those things. No one wants to be where you're not wanted or do something
Right.
where you're not appreciated, right? And I think, though we oftentimes do things without getting a thank you, when you think about those people who appreciate and voice their appreciation to you, that's what really keeps you in what you're doing, right? That is really the just the reward of what you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so, in saying that, I truly believe that when you're making these moves, that if you can find a mentor, if you can find a coach, sometimes it's great if the mentor is someone that you're familiar with and you know their journey and they can help you. But many times, either you're not comfortable with that
Right.
or you don't have that. You don't know someone that's been able to walk that walk. I know early on, I did not even know what a coach. This has been a long time ago. Didn't even know what a coach was, and I knew I was not happy with the current situation I was in. And came across this woman online. She lived in the UK, and literally, I would email her in the middle of the night, and she would respond. And she wrote these books about career change for physicians. And in that time, I was in no place where I wanted to change my career, but it gave me hope
Right.
that I wasn't the only one because I
Right.
didn't have like a trusted community where I was working. And so to be able to find whatever you may be doing, to know that you're not the only one and that you can find peace and happiness and balance, I think is really key. And that's what you're offering. It sounds like in totality for your
Yes.
clients, right?
Yes.
Beyond
Yes,
your
indeed.
career, but you're really addressing all aspects in a way that's really fantastic.
Right. Right. I use a very holistic approach to address mind, body, spirit. In addition to being a medical doctor, I also became certified as a naturopathic doctor. So it's a very different way of looking at things. We believe that the body has its own ability to heal, provided you
Mhm,
give it what it needs. And I'm also a certified coach as well,
mhm,
and an ordained minister now. So I really
mhm.
combine all these tools that I have to help people um, address their issues from a holistic avenue. And
Yeah.
it's really been great. And I appreciate the opportunity to come on with you because I feel like it's important that people hear that there's opportunity, that when you see someone who's done it, you feel more confident in your ability to then do it. And then
Mhm,
maybe the same way you reached out to that person, that author, that people viewing will reach out for assistance to help them get unstuck. They may feel this urge to do something different. They may feel these internal symptoms related to these toxic exposures that they're having, and want to do something a different way. And they may
yeah.
need help to pivot. They need permission to prioritize themselves, and I gladly be able to help them do such.
Absolutely. So if someone wanted to reach out to you, how we have your website running at the bottom. You're on social media as well?
Yeah, so my handle is Doctor spelled out Doctor Wellfit WELFIT. That's on all social media. My website is drjimmyhenry.com. I do
Very good.
offer a exploratory, just free discovery call, and we could just talk and see what your needs are, or what you'd like to
Mhm.
address, whether it's alignment, mindset, exercise, nutrition, all of the above, and we'll kind of take it from there.
Very good, very good. Well, I enjoyed speaking with you. I really hope that this, gives some people a little bit of hope, as far as this is just a life journey. You are not your job,
No,
you
exactly.
know. This is life is meant to be experienced, and you should be able to explore. And we're all very multifaceted people. And if you feel stuck, if you feel like you have talents and abilities that your job isn't allowing you to do, and it doesn't mean you leave the job, you might explore it on a side gig. But if
Mhm.
you need that push to be more whole and be at peace and be more balanced, don't wait.
Don't wait because it can affect you physically, right? So either you pivot into wellness or you can pivot into worseness, So
Right.
it's really important. A lot of times I see wellness issues, the work and career is a major barrier, impediment to their physical wellness. So it's important to address all these things at once.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jimmy Henry. I appreciate you coming on here today and
Thank you so
sharing.
much.
We have to have you come back because there's so many other things that we
Absolutely.
could also
There's
talk
so
about.
much to talk about. So
Yeah,
thank you for having me.
yes, absolutely. have a great night.
You too. God bless.